Day and night, we always look for a perfect spot to stop, chill, and eat. Don't worry, Group 8 Corp has a perfect place for you. Asa tama ngaon sa Bisag Asa.
Further begin, we will introduce first the break-even point and how important it is. So let's start. So what is break-even point? So the break-even point involves figuring out and looking at the company's margin of safety depending on the money it makes and the cost it incurs. In other words, the analysis demonstrates how many sales are necessary to cover operating expenses. Through the study of various pricing levels concerning different demand levels, the break-even point establishes what amount of sale is required to pay at the company's entire fixed costs. A break-even analysis will offer a seller important insight into their selling capacities. Second, why is the break-even point important? A business must know its break-even point to decide if the prices it charges for its goods and services will cover its production or delivery costs. The break-even point will increase as the business fixed costs rise, requiring it to sell more products in order to break even. Business should examine their actual operation cost and prices while calculating the break-even point.
Before we proceed to the computations, let us get acquainted with the following business assumptions Bisag Asa Restaurant used. Bisag Asa Restaurant started its operations in the year 2020. It is an eat-all-you-can restaurant that employs one manager, one security guard, one cashier, 3 cooks, 3 servers, and 5 kitchen staffs. The restaurant charges 720 pesos per person. Bisag Asa Restaurant has an average of 60 customers per day. The restaurant operates for 12 hours per day. Rent is 60,000 per month. Management salary is 30,000 per month. Security guard salary is 13,000 per month. Cashier and servers are paid 60 per hour. Cooks are paid 120 per hour. And kitchen staffs are paid 80 per hour. The group decided to compute the break-even point for the month. And so we begin by identifying the variable and fixed expenses of the business. For the fixed expenses, we have the following items: rent, 60,000, management salary, 30,000, security guard salary, 13,000, kitchenware, 12,000, repairs and maintenance, 20,000, insurance, 15,000, and utilities, 40,000, which gives us a fixed cost of 190,000 for the month. And for the variable expenses, we have hourly wages with a total of 295,200 and food and liquor cost of 711,000, which I will show to you the breakdown per item in the next slides. So this is the computation for the hourly wages. And this is the computation for the food and liquor cost. And so, we have a total variable expense of 1,006,200.
Contribution income statement. It places a strong emphasis on cost behavior, which helps Bisag Asa managers assess how changes in selling price or cost will affect profits. Contribution margin income statements show the contribution amount that remains after all variable expenses have been subtracted from the total revenue amount. Additional fixed expenses are subtracted from the contribution to determine the business entity's net profit or loss. Bisag Asa Restaurant Contribution Income Statement for the month of August. Bisag Asa Restaurant assumes that there is 60 customers per day times 12 since it is monthly. Therefore, there is 1,800 units sold per month. For the total sales, there is 1,296,000, which was discussed in the previous slide. Last, the variable expense of 1,006,200, which was discussed also. The difference between the total sales and variable expense is the contribution margin, which is equivalent to 289,800. So less the fixed expense of 190,000. Finally, we will get the net operating income of 99,800. So per unit, 1,800 units sold per month for the total sales of 1,296,000, which was stated in the previous slides. Divide, then we will get the per unit of 720. For variable expense of 1,006,200, there is 1,800 units sold per month, so the per unit is 559. The difference of sales and variable expense per unit is the contribution margin per unit, which is 161.
Now, we will compute for the break-even in sales. Total fixed costs divided by the quantity of the difference between total sales and total variable costs divided by total sales. First, we have to subtract 1,006,200 from 1,296,000, then divide the difference by 1,296,000. After that, we have to divide 190,000 by the quotient, which is 0.22361111. This will give us a break-even in sales of 849,689.440998 or 849,689.44 pesos. Therefore, this restaurant must make 849,689.44 pesos in this time period before it starts making a profit, or alternatively so that it doesn't record a loss. Now, let's move on to the break-even point. This is calculated by dividing the break-even in sales by the selling price per unit. So, 849,689.440998 divided by 720 is equal to 1,180.124236 or 1,180.12. Therefore, this restaurant must serve 1,181 guests in this time period to break even, that is, neither turn a profit nor a loss. Note that 1,181 is used instead of 1,180.12 as there is no 0.12 of a person. Hence, we rounded it up to the nearest whole number. Consequently, if we will use the break-even point of 1,181 instead of 1,180.12, our break-even in sales will equate to 850,320. The result is slightly different from our break-even in sales of 849,689.44 when we used 1,180.12 as our break-even point. Now, using 1,181 as our break-even point will give us a net operating income of 141 pesos. This is computed by subtracting variable expense of 660,179 pesos from sales of 850,320 pesos, thereby giving us a contribution margin of 190,141 pesos. After which, we will subtract the fixed expense of 190,000 pesos, thereby resulting in a net operating income of 141 pesos.
In this part, we will talk about the contribution margin income statements developed by Bisag Asa Restaurant and the CVP graph. As said in our lectures, the relationships among the revenue, cost, profit, and volume
can be expressed graphically by preparing a CVP graph. Hence, Bisag Asa restaurant developed contribution margin income statements at 0, 100, 500, 1,180, 1,181, 1,500, and 2,300 units sold. Shown in the screen is the contribution margin income statements at 0, 100, 500, 1,180, 1,181, 1,500, and 2,300 units sold that is developed by the Bisag Asa restaurant. Here, we will assess what will be our net operating income if our sales in units, or the number of customers who will come to our restaurant and have their meals, will equate to 0, 100, 500, 1,180, 1,181, 1,500, and 2,300. Observe the table shown in this screen. As you can see, from 0 to 1,180, we will incur a loss. However, from 1,181 and more, we will gain profit. Remember that our BEP in units is 1,180.12, but given that there is no 0.12 of a person, we will directly assume it as a whole being or 1. Additionally, if we are to use 1,180 as our BEP in units rather than 1,181, then we will incur a loss. Businesses like ours operate for profit rather than loss, and to prevent such, we will use 1,181 as our BEP in units. We will use this information to prepare the CVP graph. Shown in the screen is the CVP graph of Bisag Asa restaurant. On the bottom part of the graph, or the horizontal x-axis, shows the volume in units, or in our case, the number of customers. And on the left side of the graph, or the vertical y-axis, shows the peso. The blue line represents the revenue. The orange line represents the total expenses. And the gray line represents the fixed expenses. As you can see in the graph, there is a point where the revenue and total expenses meet. This part right here, which is encircled with red circle, is the break-even point. Notice that this is between 1,180 and 1,181. That is because our break-even point is 1,180.12. However, as there is no 0.12 of a person, let's assume it as 1. Now that we have the contribution margin income statements developed by Bisag Asa restaurant and the CVP graph for which, we can now proceed to the concluding part of this presentation. Thus, the Bisag Asa restaurant can conclude that if the business will have less than 1,181 customers, it will incur loss. If the business will have more than 1,181 customers, then it will gain profit. The BEP in units is 1,180.12, but given the 0.12, we will assume it as a whole being. And lastly, the target customers for a month for the Bisag Asa restaurant should be 1,181 and more.
Contact us through these channels. Thank you for watching.